Welcome back, Red Spotters, to another the Red Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host today, Alexis J. Soto, joined by Mr. David Francisco. And if you already know what that means, well, congratulations. We're back with another recap of WandaVision. This is going to be the recap for episode 6, the very special Halloween Spootacular. Is that what they're calling it, or is it? What's the title of this episode? What was it? I don't know. I had everything already. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was the all-new Halloween Spootacular. That's the name of episode 6.
Oh, I didn't know that, actually.
No, yeah.
The only one I remember is we interrupt your program or this program because it fits so well with that episode. Right.
So, that's the one. As we've been obviously recapping every single episode of WandaVision as they've been dropping week to week. If you want to go back and listen to our recaps, they're definitely there. They're very fun. We've had a great time doing this, and obviously, if you've been listening, it's kind of been no surprise, as we're about to say, that we have been enjoying this show so much. How we do these shows is we start off with a overall impressions, non-spoiler impressions of this episode, of the episode we're discussing, and then we're going to get into all of the particulars, the spoilers, and we like to review the episode as it happens in sequence. All that here and more on Red Spotlight number 299. By the way, that also would suggest that the next episode of our show is episode 300, and I would highly encourage you to listen to that one. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, but today, before we get into the episode, I have a laundry list of things I want to get off my chest here. It seems like concerning this show and concerning how it's being covered by the media. You know, I keep saying this seemingly repeatedly, I don't know how many times, that part of what we do that, to differentiate us from a lot of other outlets that, just talk about the episodes and all of the wonderful stuff there is to talk about them, we also do like to analyze how the conversation is being shaped as a result of these episodes, right? And I believe we've already delved a little bit into that a few episodes ago when we were talking about, I think it was in one of the episodes where it was in the latter half, toward the very end of the podcast, where we kind of had some things to say. And, this week is definitely no exception. So get comfortable, people. We've got some things to say. But before we start off with that, David, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, you ready to take these hits? Because I have some, I've got some takes. I've got some takes that the internet provided, and they ain't the best. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and show them. So what I basically have here is, for the most part, what I consider to be a list of very bad takes when it comes to the show WandaVision, right? Mm-hmm. And so I have headlines, and I also have responses by those on social media that I thought were clever responses to what it is. So let's start off with the negative here. It mostly is negative, unfortunately, but hey, that's what we have here. So from TV Line, they ran a big story this past weekend under the title of WandaVision, Reveal Your Big Bad Now. And many people were really I read that and I was like, are you watching the show? Reveal your big bad now. Demanding it now.
Yeah. I mean, for one thing, if there's only like 3 episodes left, I'm sure it's going to happen soon. The other thing, though, is that from the way the show is going, there doesn't really seem to be a big bad. It's just really us all theorizing that there is a big bad. some people, they want it because they don't want Wanda to be the villain mostly, and others, they just want the Marvel universe to expand, and they want it to be Mephisto or whatever crazy villain is in this universe. But I don't know.
That was a head scratcher. Go ahead. You were going to finish your thought?
No, that was it, basically.
Because I have some tweets in response to this. The marvelous Da7E Gonzalez, that's an interesting Twitter handle, that I noticed responding to this article, said, "The big bad is trauma." And they made that pretty clear. I mean, I think a lot of people definitely were echoing that sentiment. I have another response here by Ashley Esqueda, at Ashley Esqueda, where she says, "People all yelling, 'Where's the big bad in WandaVision?' And I'm over here like, maybe grief is enough, guys." I don't know. Like, I think we've mentioned Mephisto. Why does every single time I do a podcast, my phone has to have, and you know what? I'm sorry. This legitimately pisses me off. I always forget to turn my phone on silent, and yet every single week when we're doing a podcast and seemingly when I am speaking, my fucking phone has to go off because somebody on a red spotlight panel seemingly has something of note to say. Honestly. God, now I'm going to have to put this on silent and throw this away. God, man, I'm sorry. And then, of course, David is opening his phone to see what it was. Great. That's where... Because it also annoys me because then everyone's attention goes to the fucking message board. So it's like, fuck. God. Sorry.
Do you know what the message is?
No. What's the message?
It's my sister. She just puts, "It's cats."
That's what interrupted our podcast this week, is a message to say that it's cats.
Yeah, I don't even know what that response is for, but...
I'm losing my mind here, people. Okay. I know that you and I on the show have, and a lot of other people are throwing around the name Mephisto, and we will definitely throw that name around later on in the episode as we're breaking down what we saw this past week. And that can be a character that is going to be that can be a big player. But I think like people are just putting too much stock on like who's the villain, who's the big bad. And the frustration on the part of people like me, in case people are kind of like confused why that's kind of a off-putting, is because this incessant need by people of having everything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe be frigid and the exact same thing. Like, not everything has to feature a main villain. Not everything has to be a villain from the comics, and that's who Wanda's going to go up against. Also, if you've been watching the show, it's been pretty clear, for the most part, that Wanda is involved heavily, if not completely, in the events that is happening in the show. Whether or not that makes her the big bad, as in a villain, is really up for debate as far as we still have 3 episodes to go. We still have to discuss this episode 6 first and foremost. But again, David and I have also shown a little bit of hesitancy about whether we want Wanda to be a villain. Clearly she's an antagonist of some sort, but even that's a bit extreme because this is her show. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, she's the main character, right? And so, on that level, maybe that's what's making some people say, well, Mephisto has to be the main villain. And to their credit, he may very well be involved in this show. But at the same time, it's very clear what this show is about is not who's the big bad. It's grief. It's Wanda in pain. Mm-hmm. She has an amazing scene this episode that we'll get into where she pretty much has the opportunity to unload of how alone she is. So that was a weird article to run with on the part of TV Line, but hey, somebody had that opinion, so there it was. But it was just really interesting. I have another one here by IndieWire, and this one was pretty weird. This is what they say here. After 6 episodes, WandaVision still feels far too much like an inflated feature film that just keeps dragging out its story via inconvenient weekly installments. I'm going to read that again. And I want people listening to remind themselves what it is they're watching here. After 6 episodes, WandaVision still feels far too much like an inflated feature film that just keeps dragging out its story via inconvenient, underline that part, inconvenient weekly installments. I saw a response here by @lunwe88, and it was literally, I'm looking at 5 words here. Television, period. You are describing television, period. I have another response here by Lacey Bauer Milas, and this is an interesting take. It's really weird that this criticism keeps getting made about a superhero show with a female lead and not the space western about a guy who wanders around.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one that like got to me the most. Like, and I did think about comparisons between WandaVision and The Mandalorian. That I knew that it was just gonna be like one surprise after another with WandaVision, and I just gonna kind of have to hope that there is an ending, I guess, to this. There are going to be answers, and not just gonna seem like it's gonna drag out. That's my worry about this show, but I'm hopeful that there are going to be answers.
No, I mean that's a great thing to bring up, because I think you and I, for the most part, if there's one element that has had us concerned, it is the ultimate ending of the show, because we know, just based on the reports and rumors that are literally everywhere on the internet, we know that this WandaVision series is the first starter to this multiverse, a series of movies are having that's going to continue with Spider-Man 3 out later this year, and then Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, where Wanda is going to be a big part in that film. And so what I don't want is the ending of this show to be Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. You can use the show to start off other things. Sure, that's what Marvel does, but this show needs an ending.
Yeah.
We need something to hold us over here that'll make it like I'm not even saying that this has to be the end for Wanda per se, but like the end of this chapter that we're all experiencing together. It would be really frustrating if this entire 9-part miniseries ends up ending without an ending, and we have to wait over a year to find out where it all goes. That would be very upsetting if that's where this is going.
Yeah, for sure. But then also, one guy responded, television. You're describing television. Peter kind of touched on this when we watched the episode together. But you know, this episode was for sure the one that I was like, okay, this show needs to be binge watched, because it left like in a really big cliffhanger. Usually an ending like that usually happens like in the second to the last episode, but we have 3 more episodes left. And the thing about weekly shows, with any show that you see, there is a story from beginning to end in each episode, whether it's an answer that we're finally getting, or if the episode is just about some character trying to find a part for their car or something, but it's not really like the overarching story of the whole season and all that. So like I can understand a bit of like a frustration people are getting because of this episode, but again, we kind of just have to be patient with this series, because for some reason they decided to do it weekly instead of binge watching it. Well,
there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why they decided to do this weekly instead of binge watching. For one, it's the most successful model. I mean, from a business standpoint and from the streamer's standpoint, Disney Plus does not have a lot of output. I mean, this is the most we've talked about Disney Plus having anything, you know, when you combine these last few weeks on top of Mandalorian Season 2, on top of Soul, ever in its entire history, because they never have anything out. Now they finally have all of these promised shows that we're going to be seeing on a weekly basis, more so in this year. But the reason why that they're spreading it out week to week for the most part is they have little to nothing. So if they dropped everything all at once like Netflix does, everybody would be talking about it for a week, and then we'd all go to sleep and watch something else next week, and then this would all be in our rearview mirror. So from the strategy of the release schedule, sure, this may have been made to binge, but I guess your mileage may vary in terms of whether or not the week to week is having an impact on how you're enjoying this show or not. I am very sympathetic to what you and Peter say, but I don't feel that way whatsoever. I think my overall enjoyment and experience of this show is strengthened by these week breaks because it's giving me the opportunity, like shows like, for example, look at some of my favorite shows. People seem to have this notion that Disney Plus invented the concept of releasing episodes week to week. I mean, I don't know if you have never heard of television before, but that's how most of television shows would broadcast their programs. So, like, I remember some of my favorite shows of all time, whether it be The Clone Wars or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the reward was you would get to have that episode stay in your mind, and you would look so forward to the next installment week in and week out. And with shows like those, it just gave you a lot of nuggets to keep interested. And so my argument here is this is just giving us an extended period of time to be joyful over something, and something that, thankfully, in the case of WandaVision, is legitimately good. And yes, I get it. Seeing that "please stand by" at the end of this episode really pissed a lot of people off, but that's a good thing because we were all invested. It shows that everybody really cares and is watching this at the same time. Did I feel a little annoyed? I was just laughing because I knew all of you guys we all watched the episode at the same time, and I was laughing inside because I knew, oh my god, these assholes are so pissed off right now that the episode was already over and everything. I get it. But like, to me, I even have a piece here actually to what you were saying that, now I didn't read this whole thing, but I thought this was interesting that somebody was making this case. It was on whattowatch.com, and this was Carly Lane Perry who wrote this piece where she says, it was titled "Why WandaVision's Weekly Release is Only Helping the Show." And her main thing was, I wrote about WandaVision and how the weekly release schedule is only benefiting this show on multiple levels, including the pace of its unraveling mystery. So, which is seemingly in opposition to what you were just saying, David. So, like, this is a really interesting debate we can have maybe by the time we get to next week and see, because by the time we get to next week, we'll be well into the third act of this miniseries at this point. So, I think a lot of these issues we're having, again, as we've said at the beginning of this WandaVision recap series, are going to vary week to week to week. And so by the time we get to next week or the end of the series, I wonder how we will feel ultimately at the end of the day. But it is well noted what you and Peter say. I mean, but to be fair to Peter, he doesn't do TV the way that I do TV. He's very much the kind of person where he wants to binge the whole thing at once. That being said, he and Alexis Moreno, who I consider to be criminals in this case, go out of their way to look for leaks and spoilers of the show. Which, if you are listening to us and if you don't do that. Don't, and I know Alexis wants to sneak some shit into your ear too. You need to resist it, David, because it is a crime against humanity what she is doing. I'm kidding, of course, but like it just like it doesn't take that much self-control to keep away from leaks, guys. Come on. Yeah. So those are some interesting takes that were happening with WandaVision this week, but again, that isn't the end of it. I have some more stuff here. When it comes to, this is actually some good news. Hey, how about that? We have some good news in terms of how it was being covered. Did you know that this is the #1 show on the planet?
Yes, I've been hearing that.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everywhere. I'm glad you mentioned that. So here it is from Forbes. This is the headline they're going with. Disney Plus's WandaVision cast into top viewing spot worldwide. The miniseries has seen a huge surge in viewership, even rising to the status of #1 series worldwide. That's according to Parrot Analytics, the audience attention measurement system that captures an audience behavior dataset by sifting through social media, fan ratings, and piracy data to represent audience demand. Specifically, FAIRE Analytics noted that while initially WandaVision had somewhat lackluster viewing metrics, but when episode 5 was released, featuring a shocking ending, the series propelled to number 1 worldwide. FAIRE Analytics said its rise is a testament to the weekly release strategy used by Disney+. It's right there in the report. I mean, that's your answer for why this is being released week to week. It's because it's getting the conversation. It's getting more headlines. It's staying in the news every single week, which is what you want to do. And also, yay, WandaVision. This is great.
Yeah.
This is great. It's an amazing show. I think, honestly, the fact that all of us here were watching the last episode together, I don't know when that's ever happened. Never, I think. Maybe we did it once at the Clone Wars toward the end of its run. That wasn't all of us. It was just some of us. But ultimately, this is actually great news because it is, in a weird twist of fate, an example of something that is actually really good. And it's getting this much attention. Now, of course, the caveat there is, as I just listed off, people really weren't, it didn't shoot all the way to number 1 until Quicksilver made that cameo at the end of last week. So again, that does seem to suggest that people's attentions were not the strongest with the first 2 or 3 weeks, when it employed very heavily so the sitcom trope, or the sitcom format, shall we say. Which is a little bit like, I mean, we suspected it. We saw it online, all of the different weird reactions. I don't know how many tweets that, you and I saw over the last few weeks of people were like, as soon as you get over the first 2 episodes, the first 2 episodes are a waste of time. I think Alexis, much to her, she seems to be in a cruel twist of fate whenever, because she works at a place, shall we say, that Disney Plus is viewed a lot. And many of her coworkers usually would go up to her and ask her about the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and she hates that show completely, and so she would always be annoyed. And even in this case, when she very much loves WandaVision, she's annoyed that people can just dismiss the first few weeks. And so here's mathematical evidence that seemingly is the case, which is not really kind of what we expected. Unfortunately, that seems to be where the masses' attention is going.
And I mean, it's not that different from any other show. There's been tons of shows where the first episode, people are like, that was shit. But you know what? The series is great or something. So, I mean, it's not really that different.
Yeah.
And I'm not against the whole week-to-week type of thing. That's what I grew up on and anything. But it is cool that it's funny, I guess, that the Quicksilver one is what skyrocketed the show, because if it was binge watched, people would, depending on what the answer is as to what Quicksilver is, people would have just glossed over it, and it wouldn't have gotten this type of popularity in the end.
Yeah, we should have mentioned that, before that reveal happened, Elizabeth Olsen was teasing a Luke Skywalker level cameo on the show. Everybody assumes that was it, but I think if you don't think that was it, because I think some people are saying that maybe Aaron Taylor Johnson may be that cameo, but you don't think that was the cameo she was referring to in Evan Peters?
I don't think so, because I mean, again, we're still being teased as to who's Monica's scientist friend,
right? Oh,
so
that could be that
see
one.
On that. But also, though, if this show does open up the multiverse, we could get something else.
Doctor Strange could be one. I mean,
it could be Doctor Strange, but I want to, I don't know, just like the fact that she said like Luke Skywalker level makes me think that's going to be someone from the Fox universe, Marvel universe.
Right. But that being said, I don't think the Luke Skywalker cameo even compares to the Evan Peters one. The Evan Peters one was legitimately shocking.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think got more attention than Skywalker did. Unless I'm interpreting that wrong, but like, or to be fair, I could have just blocked it out when that happened.
Who knows? Who knows really? She probably could have meant that and just like she accidentally hyped it up too much, but who knows?
Well, you see, yeah, they like to do that. I mean, hyping is certainly a thing, but no, I mean, this is really wonderful news for WandaVision, and also seemingly very good news for FAIRE Analytics. You know, this is a firm, an analytics firm that is brand new, and as I gave you a little taste of how they calculate what's in and what's out, as far as like in-demand television, and it's really interesting to me how, in the last several years, this thing went from being treated like a pariah to now, Forbes running with it and everybody taking the numbers at face value. Because, David, and I was not planning on doing this at all, of course. And I'm being sarcastic in my tone. That way people understand what's about to come. The hammer's about to drop. But let me just, ease it in. I remember a time, I think just a few years ago, when this particular firm was not taken at face value. In fact, I believe the particular report that I'm about to read was met with skepticism, was met with pushback, and the validity of the numbers, in fact, were even put into question by several interesting figures amongst the media that cover these things, as well as the fact that it wasn't ran with, in particular by establishment folks like Forbes. I wonder what changed there. Well, let me read to you that report that came out just a few years ago. I believe it was November of 2000. David knows where this is going, and he's laughing here, but, I wonder, and I'm sure the audience knows where this is going too, but, I bring this up because I see a legitimate double standard here, and this is where it is, right? So Screen Rant had an exclusive in 2018 in November. And this is what the headline was. A headline that was not retweeted, that was not necessarily shared again by any of the big trades, aside from a few. I think the only people that reported on this were Screen Rant, Cinema Blend, and Sci-Fi, which, with all due respect to them, they're no Forbes. They're no Hollywood Reporter. They're no Variety. So let me just put that out there. But, hey, they at least ran with the story. This is the headline that Screen Rant gave, and that was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm pausing here for everybody to gasp, moan, or throw their hands up in the air, is more popular than any Marvel Netflix show. And this is what the report actually read. FAIRE Analytics, a data science company who measures demand for different TV series and even work with the Guinness Book of Records to identify the most in-demand shows, have provided Screen Rant with exclusive data indicating the strength of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s brand. According to FAIRE, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is Marvel Television's strongest brand worldwide, beating even the most popular Marvel Netflix shows. They rank Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the top 0.03%. Let me repeat that again. In the top 0.03% of in-demand TV shows worldwide. A category FAIRE classifies as amazing. Gee, I really do wonder why it was that this particular report back in 2018 wasn't treated with the same kind of pizzazz as the WandaVision one is right now. Oh, and in case you thought that's all I had here, no, I because I seemingly have a record of grievances somewhere in my mind. It seems like I have a filing cabinet here and there. But I remember vividly when this report came out that week in 2018. And of the particular outlets that did cover this story, you know what the response was? I believe Screen Junkies was like, I don't believe these numbers. That's not true. Literally, Dan Murrell, who I have such admiration and respect for, was like, that's not true. John Campea, on his show, didn't address this, but was asked via a super chat about what he thought of this report and the fact that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was more popular than Daredevil. And he was like, I don't believe it. They're bogus. They're bogus. Note that this particular person covered this story in his show this week of WandaVision being the number one show in the world, and he took the results at face value. These numbers were not questioned now when they were then. Go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, doesn't Dan Murrell, like, he analyzes stuff, doesn't he? Like box office.
That's his whole thing, is numbers. Yes. Look, there is a debate to be had about. FAIRE Analytics is an interesting firm, and they have their own different models. And I am not saying that they're beyond question. Of course, you can have the debate. The overall larger point is, why is it that these numbers were seemingly questioned when it went against the perception of most, let me just say it out there, it went against the perception of most people that S.H.I.E.L.D. was more popular than Daredevil or any other Marvel Netflix shows. And yet when WandaVision gets a similar headline by the exact same firm, I mean, is it just me? Are you seeing any people put any kind of question into these numbers? No, they're taking them at face value. There is no debate. Now, all of a sudden, Parrot is a analytics firm that is entirely right. So I mention this again to just, further proof of the double standard. And I don't even think anybody else in the world who is doing a podcast on this would even dare mention this. So there was that. And in case you thought that was the end of it, though, I have a little bit more here. Inverse, the outlet Inverse, at the last minute, decided to write up a little beauty of a headline where it said that WandaVision is finally doing what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. never could. Do you think I'm making this shit up, people? It doesn't, like, this, I don't know if there's some kind of a mystical force out there that's driving all of this, but this is particularly insulting on many levels to me. And as I think David and I have shown frustration to this in the past, Russ Burlingame actually clapped back pretty hard at this when he responded with, no, was never allowed to do because of corporate interference. Let's not turn the success, speaking about WandaVision, of a guaranteed success, which is what WandaVision was going to be, literally, it is a Marvel Studios show, into an excuse to slam a show that was a workhorse in a thankless situation. Let me just say this for the record real quick before I let you go off, David. It's not as if this show didn't try to connect to the MCU. If you're not aware of this, in the last 3 seasons of that show, they tried 3 separate times to introduce the snap, to address the snap. And 3 different times, Marvel Studios told them you're not allowed to do so. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, that's some bullshit.
All of this is bullshit. It's like, hey, did you think I wouldn't notice? Do y'all think I really wouldn't see just the complete hypocrisy, dripping off people's faces? I don't even know how that made sense. Anyway, yeah, that was interesting. And by the way, one final thing before we get into the episode. There was an interesting headline a couple weeks back of an article that said, basically, WandaVision and The Mandalorian are both good. There is no reason to attack The Mandalorian or to crap on it in order to praise WandaVision.
We were crapping on Mandalorian before WandaVision came out. Like, and again, though, I still have those same fears of WandaVision as I'm having for Mandalorian, in that we're not gonna get answers in the very end, and they're just like, it's just gonna be one tease after another. Like, again, I'm waiting till the end to really like give my full thoughts.
Right.
On it. Right now, I can say that I can enjoy this episode in particular. I'm having fun theorizing what's gonna happen next, what could be the ending. But until we see the final episode, my thoughts could completely change.
Yeah, and I'm coming at it from a different perspective altogether. And that is where my thing always is. We really needed when this show, The Mandalorian, has received so much praise by the media, Variety ran a whole, dick-sucking piece on The Mandalorian is now prestige television because it was nominated by the Golden Globes, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Writers Guild, which is horrendous enough to begin with. But they really needed to have an entire article saying, bow down, bitches, this is now prestige television. And then at the same time, if the show wasn't loved enough, we really needed to have a piece to defend people from criticizing The Mandalorian. And the point of the article was, you don't need to crap on The Mandalorian to like the WandaVision. Well, you know what, bitch? You don't need to crap on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to like WandaVision. And what do you think is happening these last few weeks? Sit down. Oh, and one more thing. I saw this tweet by, I think it was Emergency Awesome, I don't know, some Charlie, whatever his name is. He does that channel. He tweeted something out about how people are saying about the upcoming Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show is more traditional Marvel for people who were really uneasy about how weird and out there WandaVision is. And that really just turns me off because I don't even know where to start with that criticism. WandaVision is doing something really interesting and great. And there seems to be a fragment of fans who find it off-putting that it is weird and out there, and so much to the point that people have to come out and say, don't worry, guys. If all you want is traditional Marvel formula, Falcon and Winter Soldier has got you covered. The disgust, man. It's just the disgust everywhere. So I think I've had enough going after people on a daily basis, on a weekly basis now. If anyone is still out there listening after I pretty much just burned everybody, we still have a WandaVision review to get to. So why don't we go ahead and do that now with some initial impressions. This was great. I loved it. I love this show. I love the direction that it's going. It seemingly threw a lot of theories out the window and still, literally threw a lot of theories out the window. Did. Which I think if we're this late into the game and it's still being able to just completely keep us off balance, that's impressive to me. This is a great week. David?
No, yeah, I agree. This is a great episode. I liked Evan Peters in this episode.
Yeah.
And again, stand out from Elizabeth Olsen and
Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany, yes. Almost got the name.
The performances. I don't know how often we've mentioned it. I know at some point we get into how great Paul Bettany is or Elizabeth Olsen is. I mean, it should go without say, but they're great every single week. Honestly, Catherine Hahn is great as Agnes. Oh my God, Evan Peters was so much fun, wasn't he? He was so much fun. He got really into it, and he made, I think, probably like half of the enjoyment of this week. They were pretty much the B plot of this week. We didn't get to see much with Monica, Jamie Woo, or Darcy, but I really like Darcy. I like Jamie Woo, but I'm really interested to see. Obviously, the most interesting part about that is Monica, particularly with what she was teasing, not with who she's meeting with. That's not what was interesting to me. But what was interesting is it seemingly confirmed where you and I feel this is going to go, where she was like, I know whereas ultimately where her place in the story of WandaVision really belongs and what the point of her is in this show, which we'll get into in the details in a bit. But I also do want to point out Billy and Tommy are great.
Yeah.
They really are. And the overall disappointing thing every single week about this show is that I can't have a whole season of that. I can't have a whole season of because this is basically the Incredibles at this point. Like, they're all super powered families. It's not just a husband and wife, it's the kid, it's the zany uncle that comes over to visit now. I'm just sad. I'm saddened a little bit that I can't have more of the 50s sitcom or the 70s or the 80s or whatever have you. But a lot of mystery still to be had overall as well. And yeah, shall we get into it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're now going to go ahead and open it up for the part where we go over the episode as it happened in sequence, and we're going to go with full spoilers. So, the opening sequence.
Oh my so
God.
Great. Oh my God. So one thing I heard some people is minor complaint in that they said that this episode sort of skipped over the 90s sitcom era. And honestly, I don't know about that. It wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't so much an era of sitcom that it skipped over, but it more so switched to like a different style of sitcom. I know it's basically the same thing, but like the thing though for me is that a lot of comedies in like 80s and 90s, it was sort of the same thing where, you know, you get like a little montage of the family, and you get this nice looking song, and like throughout the episode it's just this like heart to heart every single time and everything. That's what I associate the 80s and 90s sitcom. And with this one though, it went straight to the crazy zany families always fighting all the time type style of comedy. And so like the big one that people kept mentioning was Malcolm in the Middle. I was thinking more of I don't know why this is the first one that popped up, but like Life with Derek, that was a Disney Channel show. Mm-hmm. I know there's like so much more than that. What else was there? I mean, I can't.
It also is difficult to come up with many memorable opening intros of the 2000s decade because, as you know, the sitcoms and the comedy television shows were evolving in that time. The opening intros with the full-blown musical sequences were going away. They weren't that big of a presence, and then by the time we get to the 2010s, they really weren't around at all. Mm-hmm. So maybe that would be, but there were still several in the 2000s decade. I have a question, a point of clarification here. Are you of the mind then that this skipped over the 90s entirely and that this is a 2000s era episode? Let me just be clear of a couple of things. Malcolm in the Middle will be coming up a lot. This Malcolm in the Middle is the quote-unquote sitcom that was heavily borrowed from throughout the episode, including the opening sequence. Malcolm in the Middle debuted in 2000, which is it's the literal transition between the 1990s and the 2000s. Mm-hmm. Malcolm in the Middle went off the air in 2007, so I don't remember if the show was all that different by the end of it as it was in the beginning of it. It's been several years since I've seen the series. I think since the 2000s decade, as a matter of fact, since I've seen it. But yeah. So because I asked that question about it because it keeps coming up about what exactly happened with the 90s. I think it's possible that the episode we got last week was supposed to be the 80s and the 90s thrown into one. Mm-hmm. If only because, remember that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also didn't touch on the 90s. And I have to wonder if part of the reason is because there really isn't much differentiation in the aesthetics of the 80s and the 90s as far as sitcoms and television is concerned.
Yeah, that's basically it. Like I said, in the 80s and 90s, it was just like a bunch of heartfelt moments between family members. And like
so was the 90s.
So it was the 90s, yes. And I just looked it up. I looked up like shows from the 90s, comedy shows from the 90s, and I'm seeing Fresh Prince, Boy Meets World, Seinfeld, and
Saved by the Bell also.
Saved by the Bell for sure. Family Matters, I guess. I don't know.
Full House.
Home Improvement.
Roseanne.
That 70s
The
show.
Nanny. The Nanny. I love The Nanny.
Yeah. And although you can't see the 80s era in the last episode, the style of the comedy within the 90s and 2000s, they're almost the same, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I guess you can say that they did skip over the 90s just because of the opening sequence. Although, to be fair, like, they all, again, like I just pointed out, Fresh Prince was like in this list, and they're not that different. It's just sort of one's more fun while the other one is just more zany and kooky, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a weird, I guess the 90s was just a weird transition between comedies.
I mean, because it is a good question to point out, like, you know, there were definitely different things that differentiated those two decades, but I don't think when I'm looking at something aesthetic wise, it is a lot harder to discern between if I'm looking at something that's supposed to be 90s, but in fact it's 80s, or maybe if I'm looking at something that I assume was 80s, but it's in fact 90s, I would assume that's pretty common. It's not like, well, look at the first two episodes of WandaVision. The first one was supposed to be the 50s, and the second was the 60s. But really looking back on it, what was the big difference between those first two episodes? They were both in black and white. The aesthetic was more or less the same.
Mm-hmm. I would say just the jokes are different.
Right, yeah. But it's I think we're talking about the flash here.
Yeah, for sure.
The big pizzazz, the opening sequences, the songs, the big aesthetics, like with the episode Now in Color, that was the 70s episode. We have that WandaVision, like that was literally the 70s. That was the Brady Bunch in many ways, that opening sequence that it was inspired by. So like some decades are clearer than others, I would say. But with respect with last episode, I think it pretty much covered all the bases that it would have in the 90s. And that is what we just discussed, is there really isn't much to differentiate between the sitcoms of the 80s and the 90s. Now the 2000s, and from a creative standpoint, that may have seemed just a bit redundant to do almost the exact same era 2 weeks in a row. Whereas with going to the 2000s, you have a very different format in terms of the sitcom, because not only do you have the difference in the opening intro, but you also have, you know, breaking the fourth wall on a regular basis, in particular with Billy. You have single camera instead of the multi-camera format of a sitcom. Now you have a single camera sitcom where you have different camera angles that are also introduced as well with the era of the 2000s. What's also very different is the absence of a laugh track, which started going out of favor in this era, in particular with Malcolm in the Middle. So those are the particular tropes that are associated with the 2000s sitcom era, which is, you know, all of which leads us to believe that this is very 2000s. I mean, the musical sequence of the opening intro, I'll get into the lyrics as I usually do every single week, but the musical sequence in and of itself was basically ripped out of Malcolm in the Middle. It was more or less the same thing. As far as the aesthetic is just so completely different. It also what was so, I guess, I don't know if heartwarming is the right way to say this, because I was kind of traumatized a little bit afterward. But, you know, we were all watching this episode together. Peter, Kyle, Alexis, myself, and David. We had just done a big recording, and we were going to watch WandaVision at the same time. And you have to keep in mind about this, right? So we're all the same age, and we're all basically brought up from the same era. We were all born either 1994, 5, or 6, depending on who you are, or maybe even 97. But that means that the 2000s decade was the era that we grew up in, for the most part, right? And, watching that intro happen was kind of like a blast from the past. I mentioned a few weeks back when I was discussing in the Guillermo del Toro series with Peter about how watching Blade 2 and Hellboy 2 made me very nostalgic for that decade. And it really does in retrospect. We didn't know it at the time because that's the decade that we were all brought up on. But just looking back on that decade, it was a very experimental period of time. It was a very experimental era. Just a whole bunch of different, choices were being made from a creative standpoint that forever changed the direction of seemingly everything. Mm-hmm. And I have here a tweet from Adam Hlavak, who is from Heroes Reforged. I've been following him for a while. He was also associated with Hyper RPG. And this is something that he tweeted in response to that opening intro and the episode in of itself that kind of was echoing what I was feeling. And this is what he said. One thing about WandaVision. Now that we're in the 2000s, this is my people's. He's a little older than we are, but I think we're in the tail end of that. He says, this is my people's age 30 to 35, childhood/teen territory. The rabbit hole that I went down, thinking about how much time has passed, how long ago high school happened, was very unhealthy. I questioned all my life choices. Think about how we're talking about just basically like a 30-40 second intro here and how much of an impact that's having on people. So that was just kind of, that was a special thing to experience with you guys because a lot of it felt very much like a time capsule, which definitely ages us very much. Mm-hmm. And of course, as all the opening sequences, they're just so wonderfully made. With, Wanda using her magic, Vision, going through a couch, the kids basically stirring up trouble. Agnes was included for the first time in this opening sequence. And then, of course, we have introducing Pietro Maximoff. Did you, by any chance, hear the lyrics of the song, or do you need me to read them to you?
Yeah, you need to read them.
Because part of the ongoing theme with the opening sequences is just how much they really are a part of the immersion in terms of the mystery and the foreshadowing. So this is what it was. WandaVision. Don't try to fight the chaos. Don't question what you've done. The game can try to play us. Don't let it stop the fun. Some days it's all confusion. Easy come and easy go. But if it's all an illusion, sit back, enjoy the show. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Through each distorted day, let's keep it going. Though there may be no way of knowing who's coming by to play. Mm-hmm. Lot of interesting things here. I think that last line, there may be no way of knowing who's coming by to play, was definitely, I think, teeing off the fact that Pietro came into the show unexpectedly. Don't try and fight the chaos. Don't question what you've done. Seems very directed at Wanda. It seems, since she is in control of the hex, shall we say. So yeah, great sequence. And so we start off and Billy is basically in for Malcolm here, for Malcolm in the Middle, and he's talking to the audience outright. And it's Halloween. And in many ways, this was kind of the episode a lot of us had been waiting for, in large part because, and yes, this is one of the rare few instances in which we can get a little bit geeky about the comic book influences. But this is a big part of why we love the trailer, and that was the parts where they showed both Wanda and Vision in their quote unquote comics accurate costumes. They looked amazing.
They look great. I also like the excuse of Wanda's costume of like, what are you wearing? It's like, oh, it's a
Sokovian fortune teller.
Yeah, and I was like, that's funny. That's great. And then Vision's I like Vision's excuse, but I like what was happening in that scene where she was like, oh, you wear your costume, thanks. And he kind of goes, yeah, it's the only thing in my closet, so it's basically like, I love that already they're showing like, okay, he's like really wanting to take control of his life now in this episode. And
he didn't go to sleep after Pietro came by. Like we're still basically coming off of that night.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing pretty much changed with him. Like and Wanda was giving him a look of like, wait, what are you talking about? And then like he was, putting on a face, and it's like, no, I love it, darling. An excuse to get me in a. I know how much you like Mexican wrestlers or something like that, which was hilarious, obviously. But no, those two looked amazing. If there was one, I struggle to call this a critique. It really isn't. It's more of a nitpick. If there was one thing about this week that I didn't like, it was the lack of Wanda and Vision interaction. No, we've had so much of it already, but just that little moment in the episode, just like, that's why I love the show. They're so great together. I also just loved them not knowing what the fuck to make of Pietro. He's the zany uncle. He's behaving as such. He's sleeping in until 4:00 in the afternoon. And then he's basically like a third sibling to the boys. Chugging sodas and then playing video games and then just watching Vision's reaction like, you never told me your brother was so great with kids or something like that. No, but those two are great. But immediately you are also back into the story because as Wanda and Vision are going over why it is that Vision has decided to not partake in Halloween trick-or-treating and then going off and doing some kind of neighborhood security thing. We cut back to Billy, who then looks at us and acknowledges that they have been having some issues lately. And what I found to be interesting about that is, and this is particularly a little bit creepy when you're putting it all together here, right? But like, so from the camera angle, Billy is looking directly at the camera and to us, the audience. Tommy is still playing video games. Only Pietro notices that Billy is seemingly talking to a presence beyond what's actually there. And if you've watched shows like Malcolm in the Middle, that never really happens. There's only one principal character that acknowledges the fourth wall, acknowledges the audience, and the fact that Pietro caught on to that was really interesting. It's really, really interesting. And don't worry, we'll get to him in a bit. But there are a lot of really interesting moments there with him. What did you make of that? Did you notice that on first watch?
I noticed like him moving, like looking at, I wasn't sure whether he was looking at Billy or like the screen or anything like that, but I noticed that he like something was off about him and everything. So and I was gonna ask you guys about it too. Like, did you see that or something like that? But I didn't. But yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, and then immediately, if you notice, like as soon as that bit's over with Billy talking to the audience, Pietro immediately gets up and settles the dispute between Wanda and Vision, allowing Vision to go off, and then Pietro being the one to help look after the kids through trick-or-treating, which I thought was, I mean, there's the interactions all over the place, I feel. I mean, amongst the sitcom characters, they're just so authentic to what would actually happen in these kind of sitcoms, you know, like that's exactly the kind of character that a Pietro Maximoff would fall into. And in many ways, you maybe suspect that's why he's doing it, because maybe that's subconsciously what Wanda always envisioned Pietro of being as an uncle. A little bit of foreshadowing there for why it is that he's behaving the way. But it's also just fun to see, right? Because like he has superpowers. You know, they get changed into these costumes, which are hilarious, by the way. And, you know, we head off into the neighborhood. I know I'm going a little bit out of sequence, but I just want to jump into that one. We're going to the neighborhood, and then they start stealing candy. They start smashing pumpkins and, you know, spraying everybody with silly string. Like, just like the interactions between Pietro and the twins are hilarious and completely authentic to what would happen. It almost is very unsettling at the same time when you begin to perhaps suspect what's really at play here. So there is that. A little bit of a tidbit out there for you. But since we're in that sequence there with Wanda, she comes up to Herb, which we haven't seen since, I believe, episode 3. Last time we saw Herb, he was only, you know, sawing down the fence. No biggie. And he almost blurted something out to Vision, which Agnes stopped him for it. But there's an interesting moment here that I couldn't have been the only person to catch, at least while watching this firsthand, where Herb realizes that Wanda is a little bit confused about Vision's exact whereabouts. We're told here that he basically had lied to her about what he was going to do. We'll see Vision in a bit. But Herb immediately was like, "Is everything all right, Wanda? Is there something you need me to change?" That felt very much like what happened in episode 5 with Agnes, when she out of nowhere was like, you know, like stopped the show, and she was like looking at Wanda and saying, "Do you need me to do that again?"
Mm-hmm.
You got that vibe, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. That was exactly what it was and everything. Because so far it's just them two that like sort of they have some knowledge of what's going on.
They have some self-awareness, it seems.
Yeah, self-awareness. That's what I was trying to think of.
But yeah, that was interesting. Yeah. I wonder. I mean, and you know what's also been brought up? Are we gonna see Dottie again?
Dottie.
She was a big part of episode 2.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, she hasn't come out at all. I mean, we'll either see her back again, or it was just a one-time thing.
Because a lot of people were suspecting she may have been a bigger player, but now she's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I don't know. I think she was just supposed to be that one-time character thing.
It's interesting. So let's go ahead and switch back to what's happening immediately outside the Hex. And that is Director Hayward seemingly being challenged by Monica Rambeau about his, how should we say, his strategy thus far in handling this situation, which is, I think, objectively very flawed, if not kind of a disaster. Like, all of the points that Monica was making were objectively true. We don't know what's going to happen if you just shoot and kill Wanda. And like, we're just to assume that it's all going to be fine. Mm-hmm. There's no way of knowing that. But you seem hell-bent on doing that. And what transpires is, well, pretty predictable in consideration to what happened last week. You know, Hayward was already beginning to double-cross her, you know, leaving her out of the loop in many different instances, not only including with the footage that he revealed, but also the fact that he lied to her about the drone, you know, being armed with ammunition, it seemed. And so they get into it, and she calls him a coward, And he basically says to her that it's a good thing your mom is dead because she would be so disappointed if she were here, because you clearly do not have the stomach to be in this job, which obviously is completely out of line. It may also be completely in character because, based on all indications, this character has been nothing but a dick the entire time, at least his personality. But it also seemingly suggests something else is going on here because he is being way over the line extreme to Monica, where really Monica did nothing wrong the entire time. But as Monica later suspects, which I believe is true, he needed a reason to sidelight them and get them out of the way, which seemingly also suggests that they were getting way too much information in terms of what his overall plans, whatever they are going to be. By the way, he is not handling this the right way whatsoever in any circumstance, it seems like. So something is going up with him there. So they're escorted off the base. Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy. They pretty comically beat up the goons like they were nothing. Somebody pointed this out, and this is hilarious to me. How did nobody hear that? They were pretty close, to the tent or wherever they were. They beat up the guards, and no one heard or saw them hurl the guards into the back of a truck and lock the door. I don't care. This is a nitpick, but I thought it was hilarious how it was all seemingly pretty obvious. And the fact that Hayward didn't exactly anticipate that at all.
I mean, I don't know about him anticipating it. Who, I don't know how it wouldn't cross anyone's mind to just in case I gotta beat up the guards or something. I don't know how that would cross anyone's mind. Plus the other guards, I think they had guns and everything. But I don't know. Well, the thing though that we kind of have to think about is that time is moving differently between both scenes.
That's
true. So we don't know the timeline between them when they beat up the guards to when they escaped. Mm-hmm. It could have been 10 minutes at least, and I think that would be enough time for them to do what they wanted to do. Yeah. Which I don't really. That's my nitpick, is that what the heck were they planning to do? Because they just randomly beat up the guards, and for us, yeah, we do want them to defend Wanda, but nothing, for me at least, nothing in the story kind of shows me that they're really willing to risk their lives to save Wanda. At least not for Darcy or Jimmy Woo. I don't know.
Those two. I mean, they are, I guess, quote unquote, invested in the storyline as we are. But it also is a good point. Time is moving differently, and not just in that aspect that you mentioned, but it also is moving differently inside of the hex as well as compared to outside. When all of this is going down, this is seemingly just mere moments after, or just a couple minutes after Wanda had come out of the hex to threaten them and then had come back in. And on the television, they're already seeing the opening moments of the episode that we're discussing right now. So that is yet another indication that time is moving very differently, between the two realities. But since we're let's just go ahead and because there really isn't all that much to say when in regards to what's going on in the sword area. Let's get them out of the way with right now. They break back in, and Darcy is hacking. I noticed a lot of people were tweeting in support, "Yay, Darcy, you're a hacker." Seemingly, of course, unaware of the hypocrisy that another hacker of a different show was criticized for hacking. But I'll go ahead and let that go. Because I don't really care at this point, but whatever. Interesting couple of moments that happened there. They realize that, by basically hacking through Hayward's security system, they found even more information that Hayward had been keeping from them. It turns out he has some kind of eyes inside of the hex. And in particular, who he's tracking is the whereabouts of Vision, or Vision's body, depending on how it is you want to see it. But it's looking more and more like Director Hayward is seemingly only concerned, at least most concerned, with getting Vision's body back.
Yeah. I think it just kind of confirms. I mean, actually, yeah, this one's, out of everything that we've like been theorizing, I feel like this is like the one that's like for sure the director's like the bad guy. A bad guy in this show. Basically, it basically confirms that like he's using his body for like experiments and all that, because the video footage that we see of Wanda taking, he's in like, he's basically Vision's basically been cut up and everything and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then him attacking Wanda just out of the blue with a missile, showing that he doesn't care about her life. And now with this, like, he knew right away, like, I'm guessing he knew right away that he needed to track deteriorating vibranium, yes. So yeah, I mean, at least for me, it's basically confirmed that he's a bad guy.
Yeah, that seems pretty confirmed at this point, and there was even more details that were not revealed entirely at the end of the episode that seemingly or assumedly Darcy had sent over to Monica, because they do split up. Darcy stays behind to find out that information, but then also that Monica and Jimmy are going off to meet Monica's contact. She had mentioned, I want to say it was last episode, that there was some kind of scientist that specializes in this field, and that her contact was coming over to meet up with them. We all asked ourselves this question after we finished watching the episode. How is it not Reed Richards? Or is it just a ruse, and it's just some other person who's a scientist? Well, I say this as somebody who doesn't really care or know all that much about that character. I only say this because that's seemingly the prevailing theory.
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned this at the beginning, that like, people are just theorizing over and over, and they're just like really hyping the show up. It's just gonna lead to a lot of disappointment. I can already see it. People are just gonna be like, "Oh, this is underwhelming," or blah blah blah. It's like, that's your fault right there, buddy. But I really don't know if it's gonna be Reed Richards or not. I wouldn't mind if it is. It's just that the Marvel universe has a lot of scientists who become heroes, so it's hard to know who the heck it's gonna be.
If you were a betting man, did you just say that you're convinced it's not him, Mr. Richards?
I really can't confirm who it's gonna be at all. Like I can't really make any guesses at all. Reed Richards would be a pretty good guess, I guess. But I don't know.
Theorizing is a double what do I want to say here? Theorizing can be a double-edged sword. That's what I was trying to say. It can be messy. Because I have here a tweet by Riley Silverman that I shared over the weekend that I thought was very apt about what you were getting at there, David. Part of the appeal, she says, of WandaVision is theorizing. I get that. It's very fun to do it. I think the reason I'm a bit anxious about the way folks have decided to... I'm sorry, hold on, I'm reading this wrong. I think the reason I'm a bit anxious about the way folks have decided what's definitely going to happen is I'm worried people will turn on it when it ends up not being the show they're writing. That makes... Yeah, go ahead.
That makes... Yeah, it makes sense. It's just, I think you know what I want to compare it to.
What would it... I mean, I brought up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why not, David? You bring up The Last Jedi. Bring up Star Wars The Last Jedi, directed and written by Rian Johnson, who, by the way, is apparently still writing another Star Wars movie. So, hey, there's that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically what happened with Last Jedi.
Yeah. That's the double-edged sword there. Yeah, that's the fact that Hayward's people were basically all just standing there as Vision was stepping out of the portal. We'll get a little bit more into that in a bit, and waiting for the body to just basically decompose and the pieces to form. Like, they were basically just letting him do that, and it looked as if they were about to pick up the pieces and then get the fuck out of there. At least that's the impression that I got, because as Darcy was saying, what are you doing? Help him. They weren't really interested in helping him, were they? But back to the scene where they separate. Rambo makes a couple of interesting comments there when she sees, Darcy confirms that every cell in her body is changing on a molecular level. The implications of those words are huge. Huge, for different reasons. But on the emotional level, I mean, to Monica's standpoint, she is aware, seemingly, that something within her is changing. But at the same time, she, just plainly states, I've seen enough cells, enough photos of cells to last a lifetime. I know what Wanda is going through, and I'm going to help her. Which seemingly confirms what you and I have been saying for a couple of weeks now, that she is going to be the emotional, I don't know if crutch is the right way of saying it, but she's going to be the tether or the main force that could bring Wanda back from the deep end, back to reality. I mean, it is grief that Monica is going through. We haven't really seen her go through it. This is a little taste of what she's going through. She may be suppressing it, but ultimately, I feel that's pretty solid confirmation about what you and I have been saying, that Monica is going to be has been going to be a big player in the final climax of this show.
Yeah, I kind of knew that from the beginning, but the thing that caught my attention was her cells changing. I don't know if you know this, but she has superpowers in the comics. You know that, right?
So I was informed a few weeks back. Although it was interesting because she wasn't a character that had any kind of powers. Nor up to this point has it been suggested that she had any kind of powers. But from what I've heard, other conversations on the internet, evidently she does have some kind of photon. Is that her name in the comics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. So yeah, I know Peter was like mentioning over and over, like, oh, it's kind of how they gonna make the mutants and all that. I don't think that's what it's gonna be. I think it's just gonna kind of like, that's how she's gonna get her powers in this universe and all that. But yeah, that's mostly what caught my attention.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, there is a little bit of skepticism about whether or not this is how the Marvel Cinematic Universe introduces mutants, because are they really going to do it all in one big swing? Are they going to use the exact same conduit, this being WandaVision, to introduce the origins of mutants and the multiverse?
That's why I don't think it's going to be. I don't think they're going to use That's why I don't think they're going to bring up mutants in this show, because they already got to bring up the multiverse.
But David, her cells are mutating.
I know, but
I don't know. Something about that makes me kind of buy it, though. Just a little bit. Like, that kind of makes sense. If thousands of people are technically already inside and have had some of their cells change already once, and at one point are, evacuated out of there, and this thing is only swallowing more and more people as the hex expands, as we've, come to find out in this episode, it's able to do that. That being said, I mean, I don't see Wanda covering the whole world in this. This would be pretty crazy,
That's why, to me, like, I know she's supposed to be one of the most powerful characters, but like, I feel like that might be too much even for her.
You know, Quake broke the world, right? I know that really wasn't her. That was with help of Gravitonium, but it was like, I mean, they can go big, but you're right though. I don't foresee, because I think this would get too big ultimately. I mean, I guess what could happen is we suspect that WandaVision, through the Hex or some other form of magic, the multiverse is going to be open by the end of the show. Maybe that's what the Hex does ultimately, in how maybe it dissipates and this energy blast all throughout the planet, and then it rips open the multiverse. But you're right to be skeptical of it doing not only ripping open the multiverse, but then also being how mutants are introduced. And both of those things being attributed to Wanda, it's pretty massive in scale.
Yeah, and also like it's just that ethical consideration, that the fact that she mutated who knows how many people around the world, without choice. Like, I feel like you already traumatized her enough by like hurting people and her losing her closest family members. And so the fact that she has to like after this, like, not only she'll probably get over the trauma, but now you're giving her a bigger one in that she mutated who knows how many people in the world, but then also it's gonna lead to like racism of the mutant race. And so she has to like, she's going to blame herself for that. So that's why I don't want it. I basically don't want that to happen to her.
Right. Enough's enough, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Unless it leads to her being the Magneto in the MCU and just don't put the actual Magneto. Maybe I'll be okay with that. I don't know. But yeah.
Interesting stuff, isn't it? But yeah. But ultimately what happens, let's go back into the Hex here. Vision is off at the other end of town, and the scene he walks into is basically a horror movie. A bunch of people, at first he sees just a couple of people off to the side, standing still or in a holding pattern of some sort. This is, one woman that is attempting, or the appearance of, taking laundry off the laundry line, but she can't do that. She's just, in a pattern of, moving her arm back and forth, and then a tear coming down her face, which is horrifying when, the implication of that could be the immense pain that people are feeling as, they're being moved by this. And then later on, Vision just comes across a point in town where no one is moving whatsoever. They're just as if they were frozen in time. And I guess the implication is Wanda really can't control everybody at the same time, or she only, because she could technically, or she just, I don't know what the implication of that was, is that either Wanda only moves people if they're around her vicinity, and when she doesn't have to, she doesn't. I don't know if this means someone else is involved. What did you make of that?
I mean, it's basically like she's the Wi-Fi router and everyone else is like the phones. The farther they are from her, the slower they get, basically. And
that's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could work. And then Vision, this is the first time we see Vision transform into his, like, superhero costume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he flies up into the sky, gives us a pretty good view of Westview, which is, I don't know what it was about it, but I didn't think it was that big. Initially, anyway. But I guess it makes sense since they keep saying thousands of people. But then he stumbles on toward Alice Avenue, which is at the end of the hex, where the barrier is at. He sees a car at a stop sign, not moving. And then he moves forward to see what that's about. And then he realizes it's Agnes. And what happens is still something I don't know how to take. Because I feel like we're being shown something, and it seemingly throws a big theory out the window, but I'm not buying it. And I feel like I was being misdirected in that sequence. What do you feel about what happened with Agnes, David?
No, yeah, I agree. Like, it does kind of feel like a misdirection, because the big question about that scene is, how the heck did Agnes get all the way to the edge of the town? Because like I said, the further you are from Wanda, the less you start working. And my guess is the only reason, like, after he like puts her back to normal, in the end, it was sort of like a little kickstart when he did that, and that's how she was able to move in the end. That's how I saw it. But yeah, just the way Agnes was towards him, I don't know, it just didn't seem normal.
None of it seemed right, but it did, I guess, on a surface level, confirm a couple of things. You know, I had been of the mind that she wasn't one of the people. She was one of the few examples that wasn't at all under Wanda's sway, and that she was the only one that was conscious, and that she had her own alternative, her own ulterior motives, or she was there helping Wanda first. I mean, she was the only one that appeared to me that was in some way conscious and the most self-aware person, only for it to have seemingly been confirmed that that wasn't the case at all, that she still was very much under Wanda's sway. Because I think the implication of that scene would have you believe that Agnes is just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. But all the things that we've seen, just that doesn't add up. Yeah. We saw it just last week that, you know, she seemingly was self-aware to the point where she was asking Wanda if she wanted to do that scene over again, if she were in an actual TV show. That doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. Like, the implication that Agnes is no one, I'm not buying it. And there were still several different things there that made me just kind of go like, whoa. She was laughing like a witch. Did no one catch that?
Yeah, they're like really hitting it hard that she is that character in the comics. I can't remember her name.
Agatha, I think, right?
Agatha, yeah. They're really hitting it hard because, again, she had the pin in the first few episodes.
Well, she was dressed like a witch, literally.
Dressed like a witch right here in this episode. So, I don't know. It could just, I mean, it's really it could be a simple explanation in the end where she was just like, yeah, I was just pretending.
There was some theories out there that were saying that Agnes was manipulating Vision to go beyond the barrier.
Maybe. Again, we just gonna have to wait to the end.
But I mean, if that's the case, why would Agnes want Vision out of the barrier? To break the whole thing? Would getting Vision out of the barrier guarantee that the whole thing would come down? I mean, if you're gonna go down that train of thought.
Yeah, I mean, if you... I don't know. Because again, we don't know the full capabilities of what Wanda can do to this world. And so, like, if she wanted, like, this whole thing to end, and then the only way was for Vision to go out, then and if she knows, like, somewhat what's going on, or, like, everything of what's going on at all, I feel like she would have known that Wanda could expand the city limits.
Yeah, that's a weird thing too, but she also says certain things, I guess, when Vision pulls her out of the sway, where she recognizes him as one of the Avengers. He seemingly has no idea what that word means, which again only further confirms that he has no memory of what happened before Westview. And then she says that you're dead. So are these people, are they seeing a walking corpse? Is Wanda and Billy and Tommy the only people who are seeing like a living person there?
That I don't know.
I don't know either. It's interesting because interesting. I'll get to that in a bit. So anyway, we cut back to. Well, I'll go ahead and go in this direction, then we'll wrap around with Pietro because there's a lot of debate with Pietro, which we'll get to toward the end. But with Vision, he breaks through the barrier. He's pushing his way through. And at first, I was a little bit thrown off because, wait. You can't do that because you're going to fall apart. And at first, it seemed like he was able to get through only for that not to be the case at all. The barrier was tearing him to shreds, piece by piece. And he was just basically slowly dying there that was pretty hard to see. And it was hilarious at the same time too, because I think when we were watching that in real time, Peter was like asking, how many times are they going to kill him?
Yeah, no, honestly, like that part what like broke my heart the most was when he starts crawling on the floor and like the thing that he wanted the most was to tell everyone, like, save everyone in the town, like get them out and everything. I can't remember the exact words, but like the way he was saying it broke my heart because I was like, oh my gosh, you're such a good person.
I know. It was sad. It was hard to watch. But the VFX, man, are beautiful.
Yeah.
Man, the money they got, it's like movie quality. But that was a hard thing to see. But then what happens is, Billy, which is I think that's the name or the son, shall we say, that Vision wanted to name the son that they were going to have just Billy. He seemingly has some kind of a magical connection to his father, to where he. Oh, and by the way, like throughout the course of the episode, it turns out that the twins' powers are revealed. Tommy is a speedster, basically like Uncle Pietro, or I guess you could also say like his father, because his father also has super speed, but it seemed very much like Pietro. And then it's revealed that Billy, I guess, seemingly has kind of the powers that his mom has, it seems like, because he was able to stop, like magical powers. He was able to stop, I believe he was also like dressed in the costume that Billy was wearing was seemingly also comics accurate.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's shown, or he's revealed to have a connection to Vision, and he senses that Vision is dying. And so he tells Wanda. And then the Quicksilver stuff, as I mentioned, we'll get to the very end, because that's what I find really interesting at the end of all this. But she basically... or Billy confirms that Vision is outside the barrier. And so what Wanda then does is she stops everyone and everything in its tracks. And she expands the barrier. And what follows is a sequence in which the barrier extends and swallows basically the entirety of S.W.O.R.D., save for the director, who was able to get away.
And Monica.
No, Darcy. No, I'm sorry. Monica had already been on the road and she was able to escape as well. But we saw Darcy hilariously say, "Oh, Fudge," as the barrier swallows her. And it was hilarious to see, though. And I would say also pretty appropriate to see that the S.W.O.R.D. agents were transformed into clowns.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. And then as soon as the barrier is extended, Vision's okay and everything. So there again is more confirmation to what we had been suspecting, is that Vision can only be alive within the barrier. You know, going back to when he said that, you know, we can go wherever we like. And Wanda's like, this is our home. when she knows you can't really leave. So therein lies the question again. How much is Wanda just lying to Vision when she says that she's not in control? When it seems by every piece of information that we've seen, Wanda is in control of everything that is happening in the Hex, save for a couple of big things. But that her expanding the barrier, and plus a conversation she has with Pietro, where Pietro basically is like, so how are you doing all this? How are you making all of this work? I mean, she basically goes back to, I don't know how any of this started, again, which we'll get into that sequence in a bit. But, you know, she expands the barrier. Is she lying? She's not lying about Pietro being here. She didn't do that. Or did she? Did she do that subconsciously? What's going on, David?
I don't know. I truly don't know. Because, like, you could say that a lot of it is subconscious, bringing back Pietro. Her not wanting to, like, disrupt anyone else's lives. Because, like, I like what he brought up is like, oh, so where'd the kids come from? Like, did you just put them to sleep for a bit until they needed to come out? And so it could be, again, that could have been a subconscious thing where she just didn't want to disrupt everyone's lives in a way. But she also knows, like, she can control basically everything in this world in her own image. I don't know.
I keep going back and forth. I mean, it is a damn good show that, you know, it makes you seemingly convinced on one side and then on the other. So it's like, I'm still, because again, the show is telegraphing Wanda's in charge, she's in control. But then when you start to look at all the different things that she's not clearly in control of, but then again, is she though? I don't know. Let's go back and look at the evidence then. In terms of Pietro. Okay. So Wanda is still confused about why he looks not like Aaron Taylor Johnson. You know, she's throwing out a bunch of questions at him, testing him, to which he says, "You're testing me." Really interesting interactions with those two. They're walking out of a theater, or they're walking around. There's a theater marquee behind them with The Parent Trap and The Incredibles, which both actually streaming on Disney Plus, and also the 2000s. I would assume that Parent Trap was the remake, not the original movie, which would have been late 90s, so to speak, I believe. But yeah, they're having interesting words with each other, shall we say? In particular, when they're, I think, at the town square, whatever it's called, and he sits her down, and a lot of interesting moments. So he says that, well, before that, he said to her that why he showed up. He said, like, oh, you know, I was shot like a chump on the street. Then there was nothing. And then I heard you call me. And then I was here. What does that mean? Because let me tell you something. Oh, I may be giving away too much. Hold on, I'll get to that point. Anyway, well, they're having the heart-to-heart, which is, I love how they're using the mechanics of the sitcom format to also, as they've been doing with the first few episodes, push forward the characterization. I love that moment for Wanda. You know, she's like, you know, one of the few times where she lets her guard down. She's completely at ease. And she basically, and, you know, you want to believe her when she says these things because she seems entirely genuine. That, she doesn't remember how all of this started, really. She doesn't really know how she's making any of this work. All she remembers is that she was completely and entirely alone. And that was sad.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth Olsen did a great job in that sequence. It was also the second time those bastards got us with the jump scare. You know, the thing is, I didn't jump the first time, but the second time, and this is the craziest thing. The second time when I was watching it again, I must have forgotten that happened, because when it cut to Pietro with the bullet holes in him, I was like, oh shit. Similarly to what happened with Vision. So, is this something that is in Wanda's head? Or is this something that everybody else beside the Maximoff family in Westview can see? Because this is the second person that has shown to be basically like a Walking Dead person here.
Mm-hmm. I think that was, for that scene specifically, that was just in her head. I think everyone else does see them as alive.
Right.
It can also just depends on like how strong her connection is to this world, because again, that's only happened twice when she like really dropped her guard in this world, and she saw that.
Right.
So again, we don't know the full extent of her control.
Right. Well, she seemingly got pissed at him. She blasted his ass when he made a joke about, relax, your dead husband can't die twice. Interesting words there. Mm-hmm. She was not happy with that. So that begs the question, David. Who is Pietro? Who is this? What is Evan Peters doing here? Like we not like what's he doing in the show? I'm not to say it like he has no business being here. It's like legitimately, what are we looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is somebody who seemingly embodies the memories of the MCU version of Quicksilver. He does not look like the MCU version of Quicksilver. He looks like from the X-Men movies. But he's not acting like there are moments in here that make him seem like he's prodding her for nuggets of information. Like he was genuinely being curious about how are you making all of this work?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was after something. And then don't forget the commercial. But go ahead.
I was going to say, and then when she tried asking him questions, he would deflect them.
Yes.
Going, what was it? Oh, do you remember that time when we were kids and we did, I don't know what was the question exactly, but he goes, you're testing me. It's like, yeah, I'm your brother, blah, blah, blah. It's like, he didn't answer the question, and you literally are trying to avoid it. And then when she goes, what happened to your exit? It's like, what happened to yours? So then, again, like, you could have possibly answered it and all that. So I don't know. What we're saying with Pietro, it could be multiple things. For one thing, it could have just been Disney like fucking with us, going like, like they wanted us to make these theories of multiverse, Fox, Marvel, and all that. So it could be that. The other one, for sure, they're trying to make us to believe that this is the Pietro from this universe, from the MCU movies. But as to why it's Evan Peters, it could be Fox, Marvel, Quicksilver, or it could just be another Quicksilver from a different universe altogether. Who knows? But yeah, there's just multiple things as to what the heck is going on with this character.
Yeah, just a lot of really interesting interactions. Like, I mean, at least it seems several times like Pietro was aware more than everybody else about what was going on here. He seemed more aware so that there was something troubling Wanda. He's very, very keen on some answers that he himself isn't sure of. almost a little bit too interested, if I have to say about that. Just some fun stuff along the way. There was a reference to Kick-Ass in there that, both Elizabeth Olsen and Evan Peters were in. So there was that.
She was in it?
Or I believe she wasn't she? I didn't watch the first Kick-Ass, but I know Evan Peters. Or maybe the reference was that Evan Peters was in Kick-Ass, and that's what she
Evan Peters was, but also Aaron
Taylor Johnson was in there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Elizabeth Olsen was in it.
I don't remember, but I don't remember watching the first movie. I only watched the second one, ironically enough. I'm trying to remember here if I, going over the episode, trying to scan for things that I might have missed in regards to Pietro. But yeah, I mean, he acknowledges up front of like all the, he seemingly comes to her as a friend and understanding. Like, he doesn't seem to have the mind that what Wanda is doing to these people is bad on any level, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. It also, again, seemingly confirms that Wanda, at least consciously, is not aware how he even got here, or why he's even here, or why he even looks that way. Here's something, though. And someone else pointed this out on a different podcast. Do you remember at the end of last episode? I know a lot of us were really distracted with Evan Peters showing up at the doorstep and everything. But take a moment to recall what also happened in that sequence. We saw Darcy racing to the television set to see what it was. She would later on to say she recast Pietro, but recall what also was happening in that sequence, why she was running up to the television set in the first place. There was an alarm going off. And again, this was after Wanda had already come back into the barrier. This was not that alarm should not have been, I guess, to suggest that Wanda had come back. I don't know. But a lot of people seemingly dismissed it, but that alarm was going off at the exact same time that Pietro was about to make his introduction. And what this person was saying on the podcast is that alarm goes off anytime anybody comes near, in or out of the barrier. Recall what Pietro said, also in this episode. I was shot in the street like a chump. It was nothing. And then I heard you call me and I came. And this person, what he was getting at was, whoever this version of Pietro is or is not, seemingly came from the real world and walked through the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the other thing on my mind, which was what Wanda both saw Pietro and Vision basically walking dead people, walking corpses. I don't know if this would be too disturbing to suggest in any way whatsoever that she literally called the corpse of her long dead brother from the ground to walk through here. That would be too much in the sense that, well, wait a minute. Does she literally have the powers of resurrection? Or is she just here utilizing some corpse to reanimate a memory of her brother? But then again, you also have to ask the question, why does he look different? What's going on here? So that doesn't really pan out all the way. Not on the surface anyway. But then there's also the Mephisto question. Is this Mephisto in disguise? David?
Well, I don't think this is someone from the outside world coming in because whenever someone goes into the portal, it's really just a random effect. You don't know what the heck you're gonna get. Because again, Monica, she went through and she just became some background character, and that went forward basically. And then when the barrier expanded, those two sword agents become clowns. You don't really know what you're gonna expect, and so for someone to just go inside and automatically get a certain role that they put that gets them close to Wanda right away, big of a coincidence, honestly.
What about the Mephisto thing? Because, I mean, again, we can't dismiss the fact that we discussed last week that Pietro came at the exact moment that Vision was beginning to talk Wanda out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And what does also Pietro do this episode? He ensures that Wanda and Vision are separated.
Yeah. I got, like I was saying before, like whenever she would ask him questions about their past or anything, or certain questions, he would deflect it. That could be because it's someone controlling him, or like someone like Mephisto controlling him, and just not being able to get certain answers. But yeah, again, this is just a really big question that we're just gonna have to wait till the end.
Yeah. I mean, those are good questions to ask. But again, I asked those questions as if I had any idea what the answers were. I don't. I don't in the slightest. Any last thoughts on the episode? Anything that we forgot to cover or mention?
No, I think we got everything.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're about ready to wrap here. But we're waited with bated breaths for episode 7. And we'll see where that road takes us. Thank you, David, for being here, and thank you all for listening to another show here on Red Spotlight, another WandaVision recap. We have the recaps every single week, and a reminder, you can listen to our podcasts every single Sundays, sometimes on Thursdays, on anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it be CastBox, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you here next time. Stay under the spotlight. Bye-bye.
Bye.